We'll begin our discussion now, and we'd like to begin with the first question of how has CFC evolved to support the alliance and defend against the North Korean threat. Let us begin with General Lee.
제 목소리가 잘 들리시나요?
Do you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
브룩스 사령관님은 뭐 저하고 같이 근무하면서
General Brooks worked with me, and he's my big brother. And Stephen and other moderators and Colonel Steve Lee, all those people I've known for a long time. I'm really happy to see you all again. By commemorating the anniversary of the CFC, it actually came to make think considerably about how CFC has defended the Republic of Korea from the North Korea's threat, and what kind of important role has CFC has played up until now. So 1953, July 27, war ended. And since then, the war did not reoccur again. It was because the CFC and the UNC existed and is located in South Korea. That's my opinion. So CFC, if we look at the progress, so July 7th of 1973, 78 CFC was founded. We have to think about the situation of that time. 1978 was the time that President Nixon announced the Nixon Doctrine, and the Vietnam War was the big issue. And under the Nixon Doctrine, President Nixon says that the U.S. has to put more responsibility of things happening in Asia into Asian government. So in 1971, the 7th Army withdrew from South Korea, and at the 30th UN General Assembly, there was a saying that UNC should be dismantled, and the agreement was passed. So the discussion about withdrawing UNC or dismantling UNC was underway at that time. Another thing we have to remember is that 1976, I don't know if everybody remembers it, there was a massacre of acts at the DMZ area. So that was the moment that we were very close to the occurrence of the war. So DEFCON 2 was issued. So by facing the situation that we may start the war, so we thought about the UNC's existence. So the UNC at that time, the UNC at that time, according to the US and the ROK, was not a proper organization to initiate the war. So, and the president also said that the CFC needed to be, the US Army needed to be withdrawn from the South Korea at that time. So CFC's role became very important. And that way, the OPCON, the wartime OPCON was handed into the CFC. After that, the Korean political situation and other issues, political issues happened. And in 1994, the peacetime OPCON was handed into South Korea. And from 1994, the CFC only maintains the wartime OPCON. And in 2000, from the 2000, because of the North Korea's threat of missiles and nuclear weapons, escalated, and the CFC, in addition to the conventional tactical army or the capability also needed to have a more modernized capability. So the Patriot and the SAD was located in South Korea, and the CFC needed to grow the power to manage those SAD and Patriot system. And in 2002, a lot of serious situation happened. Cheonan Am attack and Yeonpyeong-do attack happened in 2000, in the beginning of the 2000. So in South Korea, there was a saying, not only in wartime, but also the peacetime, we have to prepare for the possible threat from North Korea. So in 2013, the ROK-U.S. Joint Development Plan was established so that we can prepare for the North Korean threat. So when the threat happens, even during the peacetime, the CFC, both countries can respond to the situation. So CFC, since it was established in 1974, 78, has been evolved this way. So in the future, based on the issue of the OPCON transition, the CFC is also facing a lot of issues. But I believe that this topic is going to be a good topic that we can think about to make CFC much better a command in the future. So CFC up until now has deterred various threats from North Korea, has played a pivotal role. So what I can say is that CFC role up until now is the heart of the ROK-U.S. alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, General Lee. Bruce Klinger.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank KDVA for the opportunity to be here. Although I must say it's a bit intimidating talking about Combined Forces Command with the current and former commander and the former deputy commander. So as the only panelist without 4 stars on my shoulder, I feel a bit like it's Thanksgiving and I've been asked to move from the kiddie table up to the big table. And everyone sort of turns and is like, well, since you're here, say something brilliant. So let me give it a shot at least to earn my keep here. You know, in seeing how CFC has evolved, I like to focus on just sort of one part, and that's the very significant improvement in the South Korean military in recent years. South Korea has spent a lot on their military, and to some people, they'd be surprised more under a progressive government than under conservative governments. And Seoul appears to be procuring all the right equipment. So in the past, when I interacted with US military officers and officials and experts, there were a lot of criticism of South Korean military and lots of recommendations on various weapons or other systems that South Korea should procure. But in the intervening years, Seoul has largely fulfilled all those or most of those recommendations that people gave me. You know, they've really done across the board improvements in all the services. So now when I talk to experts and officials, the areas of concerns are now down to 2. It's insufficient C4ISR across the Korean services, as well as with the US down to tactical levels, and a inability or constrained ability to conduct joint and combined operations. So the lack of the first impedes the ability to do the second, as well as it to push tasking to US forces or to UN sending forces once OPCON transition occurs. And that would be a critical requirement to fulfill. So US officials privately comment that the South Korean military still lacks the necessary C4ISR and the capability to overcome stovepipe command structure to really enable OPCON transition right now. So, you know, to be sure, South Korea has devoted considerable resources and attention to improving those areas. But while the capabilities have improved, it's been at a slower pace than the US would want. And the gap between the US and South Korea may actually be expanding particularly as both the US Army and the US Marine Corps are implementing new multi-domain strategies and operations and procurement plans. So, but overall, a vast improvement in South Korean military in recent years. So I think Seoul's to be commended for that, successive administration. So that has enabled CFC overall to be a much better fighting force and a much better deterrence against North Korea.
Thank you, Bruce. General Brooks.
Well, good morning in Korea. 안녕하십니까, and good afternoon, good evening to those who are watching from the United States. First, let me say thanks to General Abrams, our current commander, for his leadership and for his remarks as well. And then frankly, thanks for the comments about how you and the command have been attacking the COVID virus. Absolutely remarkable, but a very good example, as you said, of the nature of the ROK-U.S. alliance. So I'm just grateful that we had you to provide remarks today, and thanks so much for taking the time to do that in the midst of a very busy schedule. I also want to thank KDVA. I'm the chairman and president of it, but nevertheless, there's good effort that's been done to create this webinar and several others like it. And I hope that those of you who have tuned in will continue to tune in to our various webinars, and we'll talk some more about that as we come to the end. And of course, it's a great honor to be discussing with Dr. Steve Noerper and Dr. Ashton, both great scholars whom I've come to know and admire very, very well. And to be on a panel with my former deputy commander, my Pusaringwan, and General Im Ho-young, who is also my younger brother. We are brothers for sure, based on the experiences we had together, trying to lead this combined force in the midst of a very difficult time in 2016 and 17 while we were together. And of course, Bruce Klinger, who is a tremendous expert. Bruce, we're the ones who are joining the big table with you. So thanks for your presence and your observations and your astute focus on the Korean Peninsula. Some great points have already been made about the progression of the Combined Forces Command that we now celebrate the 42nd birthday of just a few days ago. And let me just add a few thoughts and observations. I think one of the points that needs to be made is how the subordinate structure of the combined force has emerged. Now, we've talked about the headquarters in many ways being established in 1978, initially having the operational control of Korean and American forces in armistice and in war. That was the original structure in 1978, essentially taking those roles away from UN Command, as General Abrams highlighted to us. But by 1994, that changed. And with the growing capabilities of the South Korean military, and candidly, a desire for greater sovereign authority over the defense of Korea in armistice, the control of Korean forces and US forces was released in armistice in 1994. And that Korean authority passed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Republic of Korea. So it's very important to recognize the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff as an operating body from that time on, and that continues into this day. It's the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff who control the defense of Korea on a day-to-day basis in armistice. Now, beneath the headquarters level, what we've seen is a migration away from an Army-centric approach to warfighting to a joint-centric approach. In other words, not just the Army being focused on between the United States and South Korea, but rather organizing not into Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine elements, but into combined component commands. So a combined ground component command that has all ground forces from the United States and from the Republic of Korea. A combined air component command that has air forces from the United States and South Korea. A combined special operations component command, a combined naval forces command, a combined marine component command. These are the structures that are subordinate to the combined force headquarters. And that combination of combined components, subordinate headquarters to the parent headquarters, the ROK-U.S. CFC, Combined Forces Command, is extraordinarily unique around the world. You'll see that configuration from time to time in the opening of combat operations, as was the case in Afghanistan in 2001. But a standing organization like that, this one is unique. It's the only one in the world. So that migration is very important. I think it's important to recognize also that the migration has, in many cases, been driven by political decisions about the force levels on the Korean Peninsula. That's what drove some of the genesis of the Combined Forces Command in 1978, particularly after the axe murder incident of 1976 in Panmunjom. There were decisions about reducing the US force presence and increasing the burden of defense onto South Korea. That was the basis for discussions again in 1971 to 1992, during which time a combined field army was created as a standing headquarters to coordinate the war plans between the ground forces of the Republic of Korea and the United States. It was a combined army at that point in time. But what was driving it was a reduction of US forces, as you heard, a reduction of the US 7th Infantry Division as one illustration of that. Eventually, that combined field army was disestablished in 1992 in a discussion about reducing forces yet again and passing greater authority to South Korea. South Korea was yearning for it, and the United States was yearning for it as well. So we see that there's a pattern of pressure politically to change the configuration of forces on the Korean Peninsula that have driven much of the evolution of the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces Command. I would submit to you that's still somewhat the case as both countries look at what their postures should be and what the burden should be between the two. And even as we think about perhaps a successful progression to a condition of peace on the Korean Peninsula. All of this was thought through in the early 2000s, and particularly coming into a design in 2009, a mutual agreement between President Obama from the United States and President Im Young-bak from the Republic of Korea. And there had been a decision that the wartime control of forces would transfer also to a South Korean lead under the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that would occur by 2012. North Korea has a habit of intervening in this decision-making process of the alliance. And the shelling of Yeonpyeong Island in 2010, as well as the horrific sinking of the Cheonan, changed the dynamics in 2010. General Im has talked about the decision-making processes that came thereafter in 2013, but it changed the basis upon which this transformation was to occur. And so by 2012, the conditions no longer matched what had been anticipated in 2009. And a delay in that transfer was put into place with a timeline associated with 2015. The box mine incident that happened in the summer of 2015 changed that dynamic yet again, as North Korea planted mines on the South Korean side of the demilitarized zone, right along the fence, that traumatically amputated the legs of two great soldiers from the Republic of Korea. And so all these things are dynamics that impact the shape of the Combined Forces Command. Now we face a new condition where we're not going to separate into the JCS and a Korea command, but rather into one remaining Combined Forces Command, where unity of command is preserved under a South Korean commander, but under the same structure of binational authority and decision-making that General Abrams talked about. And this is the current state of play on a long journey that has begun since 1978. Let me just finally make the last point as we think about the birthday of Combined Forces Command. We can't help but think about the first two leaders, American and South Korean, both now deceased. But General Jack Vesey, who was the American commander at the time, really reset the table on how the relationship operates. And it was for him that we named the new headquarters in Pyeongtaek. And General Lee Byung-hyun, who was the first South Korean deputy commander of the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces Command in 1978. And may he rest in peace, as he passed away just this past May. So we certainly think about him and his family and his many contributions, even up to the age of 97. So with that, I'll stop and let's get into some more questions and discussion.
Thank you, sir. This was certainly very comprehensive and deep insights into the evolution of the CFC.